Hello and good morning, everybody. How you doing? We're having another great webinar. And if you're like me and a lot of people out there on the internet, you don't like Windows 10 at all. And so we are going to go over a lot of the fun, common things that, that just help to make Windows 10 a little more um, a little less painful. I don't know. I think even Microsoft freely admits it is a kind of a bit of a mutt of a operating system. It's not completely in their new style. So we can all look forward to Windows 11 or whatever's coming down eventually. But it is definitely time if you haven't already moved to Windows 10. And if you have moved to Windows 10, you sure miss Windows 7 like all of us. So we are going to go over all the little things that make it a heck of a lot easier to operate this beast of an operating system that we all seem to have to struggle with because that's the nature of things. So, hey, enough of my yibber yabber, huh? I got a couple quick housekeeping items before we get going. Note there's the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Stands for questions and answers. I'm sure you'll have a lot. I recommend go ahead and clicking it now just so you're kind of used to it. But note that if you leave that up on the screen, you can see any questions that we type in to answer any answers we type in for other people's questions. So it makes a great little companion while you're watching the webinar. And we are recording this, so you'll have that. But so enough of my yibber yabber. Hey, Bennett, let's rock and roll here.
All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. That was a lot of numbers coming from Jer. Just in case anyone was not clear, we are talking about Windows 10 today. Windows 7 is deprecated at this point. I believe they finally ended support for that in January. So if you're still on 7, definitely something to look into moving away from because you will no longer receive any security updates. So at this point, it just becomes a larger security vulnerability. All right, let's get started. This is my face. There are many like it, but this one is mine. I've been wreaking havoc on computers now for a little over a decade, so I know just enough to get myself in trouble or to break things. I don't know which is worse. Here's what we're going to be looking at today. Just a quick summary. We're going to be doing all this live in Windows, so not very many slides. We'll start with navigating the desktop. We are talking about Windows 10 basics here, so if you're new to the platform or you're just not super familiar with the Windows platform at all, maybe you're not familiar with moving shortcuts around, adding new applications to your taskbar or your desktop, or setting different applications to show up on your taskbar. So we're going to take a look at that. Working with files, this comes up quite a bit. Anytime you're moving a file or copying a file or looking for a file, you have to use an application called File Explorer. So we're going to dig into that a little bit and some of the settings you can tweak to make it work to your advantage. Searching for files and apps. A really big thing with Windows 10 is searching. Even I don't know where to find some settings and buttons. So I find myself more often than not actually searching for it rather than clicking through contextual menus to actually find its landing page. We'll look at adjusting some of your settings. So, nothing too crazy, mostly just preference things, colors, backgrounds, themes, maybe some security settings, tracking stuff, that sort of thing. Windows 10 introduced multiple windows a little bit better. Windows 7 had some basic functionality with multiple windows. Windows 10 added multiple desktops. So we're going to take a look at that and show you how you can set that up to really optimize your workflow, I suppose. And then personalizing windows. Again, this is going to circle back to the changing like your font scaling, your resolution, your themes, your font color, your font scaling. I think I said font scaling. Your basically tweaks to make Windows more yours. So let's go ahead and just dive on in. So this is going to be basically a fresh install of Windows. I've done minimal things, installed, the necessary land effects software. We've got FXCAD and land effects on here. But other than that, everything is in a plain vanilla state, like it would be if you had just turned the computer on. So the first thing we want to talk about is your taskbar. That's this giant bar that runs along the entire bottom of your display. This guy is obviously where your start button is, over here on the far left. And you can pin applications so they are always here. Normally your applications are of course hidden in your start menu. You can pin them down here so they're available for quick access, and you can change those. So you can pop them off. If you're familiar with right click, you can right click one and just hit unpin, and that will of course remove it. So we don't want to do that yet. And then to add another one, same thing. You can find one, right click, and go pin. Oh, no, we don't want that. We want pin to taskbar. So pin to taskbar, we'll throw that guy down here so it is permanently available whenever you need it. Makes it a little bit quicker to find the applications you use on a constant, regular basis. The bottom right of your taskbar is going to have your clock. If you click your clock, you get a full calendar. If you have your calendar account set up, it'll show you all of your daily events, whatever you've got going on the 7th. If I had this link to my account, you would see that there's a webinar today, in case you weren't aware. All right. It'll also show you running applications. You got this little arrow doohickey guy here. Any applications that are not set to permanently display here. So you've got your speaker icon, just your audio levels, of course, networking to show you whether or not you're connected in case you can't get to the internet and you're not sure. And because I'm on a laptop, I have a battery, which fortunately is at full. Anything that's not pinned to constantly show will be in this little pop-up section. So you may have, 20 applications running in the background, but only see 3 things here. So always important to remember that you got this guy, because you may have something that you thought was closed that's not actually closed. Right, opening folders. So you're probably going to hear this from us quite a bit when you need to navigate to like your like a directory that has your drawings in it or anything like that. Anytime you're looking for files or folders, you're going to be using File Explorer, and that's this little folder guy on your taskbar. So by default, this is going to be the main landing page, quick access. So it'll have your frequent folders that Windows thinks you need. So obviously your desktop download. I'm not going to read all these off, but these are going to be the most common things that you'll use. You will use File Explorer anytime you're looking for something. So say like I want a drawing. That's of course going to be stored. Well, I put it in my documents folder because that makes sense to my noggin. Same thing if you want to copy a file, you'll have to use File Explorer to find it. And right click is going to be a big one. Most things in Windows are going to have a right click contextual menu. Contextual is a big word. It's going to have a right click menu with a lot of various options, and you can use this to open, of course. You can choose open with if you want to pick a different application than what's default, and you can of course change the default application. So again, that's getting into the customization things. We'll cover that in a little bit. So if I have a folder that I double click, it's going to open up a File Explorer window. You don't just have to access it via this folder button here, because obviously some people will move things around and take things away. So you may not even have that folder icon. All right, that covers the basics of File Explorer. Now, one thing I did mention really fast was the Start button. This is basically the main landing page for anything you do in Windows. If it's not on your desktop and it's not on your taskbar, you generally have to go to Start. Another thing you may notice is that you do have to go to Start to shut down. Jeremiah was actually making a little joke about that before we started here. It's you have to start the shutdown process. Makes a lot of sense. Said nobody ever. All right. Now, one thing I do want to talk about is we do periodically run into situations where like the entire desktop will just be blanketed in files and folders, which is perfectly fine. I mean, you're totally capable of doing that. Just one thing to note is that the more data you have on your desktop, it does slow down the Windows boot up process a little bit. So generally, I personally prefer a uncluttered desktop environment. I actually don't have anything on my desktop well, I do here. I try to keep most things off my desktop in folders. For that, you can, I mean, if you have a ton of folders that you like to keep, personally, I would create a, no, let's not call it desktop. We're on the desktop. Desktop items. So you can throw all your stuff in a folder so that, you know, you don't have this massively cluttered look. Because it does make it difficult if you're looking for one specific file when you have to search through a block of 20 different items that covers this up. You got to read through each one. It makes it a little bit annoying. So just one little tip to try to keep things a little bit cleaner and organized, to try to keep things in folders specifically for what you're using. And the trade-off of that is it, of course, speeds up the Windows boot process if you don't have a ton of data sitting on the desktop that Windows has to load. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into opening applications. Everyone's done this. Everyone's opened an application at some point, I hope. You can do that from the start menu. You can do that from the taskbar, but generally, you'll be doing most of that from the start menu until you figure out what you need down there or on your desktop, for instance. Let's see. Okay. So let's go back to File Explorer. We already covered the basics of it. You'll use File Explorer for browsing, moving, renaming, you know, any kind of manipulation with individual files. And a quick way to create a new file, like if you need a text file, say for a shopping list or anything, we're going to go back to that right-click contextual menu. And you just go down to new, and you can create, obviously, a folder like we did on the desktop. So you have desktop items. You can create a shortcut. I don't recommend doing that because then you have to manually set all of the settings to go to the application you want. But you can do like a new picture, a new rich text document. It's a different kind of formatting. Basically, very similar to a text document. You know, most people won't use one versus the other. And a compressed zip folder. Now, the compressed zip folder is probably one of the most useful things you'll use, especially when working with land effects, because if you ever have a problem with a drawing file or you run into an error or anything like that, we're going to ask you to send us a copy of those files or a screenshot of that message. In order to add anything to our ticketing system, though, it does have to be in a zip format. So simplest way to do that, so say this is the screenshot we just took that we need to send to land effects, you can right click that and go down to send to and go to compressed zip folder. And that's going to create a nice little zipped file format, compressed file here on the right. We got that type. And then you can just attach that to your ticket or email it to us, and that'll give us what we need. So that's the simplest way to create a zipped item. If you ever need to, something that may be overlooked sometimes is selecting or working with multiple files. You can click and drag. So if you hold the left click and drag, you can draw a window that'll select, you know, anything in that window. It's one way to do it. You can also hold Control and press the A key for a Control All, and it'll select everything that's within your current view. Very quick way to select everything. Maybe you don't want everything. Maybe you want, say I want the image and this text document. Again, you can click the text document, hold Control, and then click the other one you want, or say I want 3 of them. As long as you're holding Control, it will continue to select new objects, and you can click a previously selected object while holding Control to deselect it. Another little trick, let's say I wanted, say you've got a list of maybe, I don't know, 20 things here, and you want maybe items 4 through 12. So you're in the middle of the batch. So short of trying to draw a window and hitting your narrow selection of ones that you want, you can click the first item. So you click number 7 and then hold the shift key. If you hold the shift key, whatever other item you click, it's going to select that one and anything in between. So if we click the bottom guy, it's going to select all those guys in between as well as that. So very quick way to grab a previously determined list of things when you don't want to grab them all. Okay. All right, so we talked about creating a shortcut, or at least we looked at creating a shortcut using the right-click menu. Another way you can create shortcuts to items is if you actually have an item to create a shortcut to, you right click that guy and then go to send to desktop. So that'll create a shortcut to the drawing. Now this is not a copy of the drawing. This is a file that links back. You can see under there it shows location. It shows the location of the source file. So this is just a link. So if anything happens to this guy stops working. Another way you can create a shortcut is you can hold the Alt key, and drag an item. And that will create a shortcut to wherever you place it. So maybe you don't want a shortcut on your desktop, but you want a shortcut in your downloads. I don't know why you would want a shortcut to an item in your documents in your downloads, but hey, that's how you can do it. Hold Alt key, click and drag, and allow you to create a shortcut. Or you can right click, send to desktop, create shortcut. Okie doke. So we got a couple shortcuts now. We don't have any to our documents. So again, we'll just hold Alt, make a little shortcut there. All right. Oh, and a neat little phenomenon that used to happen in Windows 7. If you created a shortcut to this drawing 1, for instance, and then for whatever reason you came in here and renamed this to drawing 123, that shortcut would break. It looks like the Windows 10 updated that. I tried this earlier, and it still works. So they're using some fancy little stuff in the background there to make that keep going, which is cool. It's one less thing to have to keep track of. All right, so say you've started setting up your shortcuts. You've added shortcut to your documents, your downloads, whatever else you need, a couple of drawings that you work with, some applications, and you end up with a scattered list of items that just kind of go wherever they please. You can set your desktop to sort items by a particular format. By default, it's just going to let you place them wherever you want. You can sort them obviously by name, which is clearly going to go alphabetically, or at least it's supposed to. But the issue with Windows is that it doesn't really respond too well with that with different file types. So it'll sort them alphabetically per file type. So just something to keep in mind there. You can play with the different sort by file size. So if you work with a lot of large files, I wouldn't really recommend sorting your desktop by file size. At least I wouldn't personally use that, but I wouldn't personally use a lot of things. So item type was one that I used to predominantly use, simply because I can basically sort it by folders, shortcuts, and then by actual files. But it looks like with Windows 10, at least with the shortcuts we're working with here, it basically groups any shortcut into the same group, regardless of whether it's a shortcut to a folder or a file. So you'll just have to play around with the sort methods and kind of pick the one that you like the most, or leave it on click and drag and just place them wherever you want. Maybe you like having something way over here on the right. I don't know. Okay, and the same thing, for the same way you can sort your desktop, you can sort your folder views. So you can come into File Explorer and your documents, for instance, right now, obviously being sorted by name. Personally, I prefer sorting folders, especially documents, by date modified, because it's going to show you the most recently modified item at the very top of the list, or you can also reverse it and show the oldest item at the list. Pick and choose, play with the different sort methods based on what you prefer. Now, one of the most common phrases you're going to hear from any of us is going to be look for your C drive or go to your C drive. Surprisingly enough, that's not entirely intuitive when you're looking at this view. I mean, does anybody see a C drive currently? Let's close this and reopen it and see if we see a C drive. I don't see a C drive. Windows 10 uses this PC. It's basically what my computer was for the Windows XP and Windows 7 days. So this PC is going to be your main landing page for your computer, this computer. Again, you have the most commonly used stuff, your folders, 3D objects, I don't think I've ever used, but your desktop downloads, pictures, all that good jazz. Devices and drives, this is going to be any physical device, drive, USB drive, memory card, anything like that. Any physical device that is connected to this computer is going to show up under devices and drives. So obviously we have our local disk C here, or C drive, and then network locations is going to be anything that's on your local network, maybe your office server, maybe you have a NAS, anything like that. You know, a coworker's machine might show up there if you've mapped a drive to it. Oh, map drives. If you work with LANFX and you use a multi-user environment, you should have a mapped drive to your LANFX folder that will show up here under network locations. So anytime you need to get to your C drive or a map drive or anything like that, just remember this PC. And you can, of course, expand this so that you can see all of this in the sidebar. So you don't actually have to click it. You could be in your documents and still have access to it. But this PC is the landing page where you can get to your local disk C or D or E. Depends on how many drives you have. Right, a couple of quick settings to change with File Explorer. Personally, we like to turn on hidden items. One thing you may run into is, you know, if you're working with CAD and you have to replace or anything happens to your AutoCAD.coix file, that's going to be in a hidden folder in your users folder. So we may tell you to go to app data, that's under your users folder, and I don't see an app data here. That's because Windows decides that some items should be hidden. And that is mostly to, you know, prevent errant damage or misclicks or, you know, accidental deletes. So I didn't create that folder, and delete and just get rid of that. And then, you know, Windows may not work properly the next time you turn it on. Who knows? It's kind of all over the place. It does what it wants. But we like to turn that on so that you can quickly and easily pop in here and you have access to these folders. So the same thing, there's also program data here, which a lot of applications use for main files, especially Autodesk. LANFX uses it as well. So if you have hidden files off, that folder really doesn't appear to exist. So we like turning on hidden items, and we also like turning on file extensions. So I'm going to say so a lot, by the way, if you haven't noticed yet. One of the things that you may run into at one point or another with LANFX is needing to revert a file to a backup version for whatever reason. You may get an error in the software that says missing install.xml file, and you need to reverse it with a backup. The documentation will run you through pulling up your LANFX folder here and looking for an install.xml file and replacing it with the install.xml.back. I see the back. I have the .xml.back right here, but I don't see an install.xml file. That is because Windows likes to hide known file name extensions. So the file name extension is there. This is your install.xml file, but Windows trims off the last little bit to make it look a little bit neater and cleaner, which is fine, except for when you actually have to work with the files. So one more thing we like to turn on, makes it a little bit easier to navigate and keep track of. The circling back to the file organization type, you can do the same thing here, and then it'll actually sort it by your folders, executables, and then every other file type it can think of and sort into whatever process it deems worthy or necessary. Sometimes it's easiest just to use name. All right, so we covered some File Explorer stuffs. Let's talk about searching. Searching is a big thing. I'm sure many of you have probably used Google at some point. You know, look for a new recipe, anything like that. You can also do the same thing with Windows. So maybe you don't know where an application is. Let's see, what would be a good example? Let's look for AutoCAD as a start. So because I have next to nothing installed on this computer, AutoCAD's right here at the top of the start menu. It's pretty easy to find. But you may have, 200 applications installed and it may not be that easy to find. So what you can do is you can open the start menu and you can just start typing. And it will search your computer for that term. Now, of course, you're going to get varied results based on what you're searching for. So since I'm looking for AutoCAD and the application is buried a little bit, it may not pull up the application directly. So let's look for control panel. That may be something you'll hear us ask you to find. Now, control panel is it's a management and control dialog for your system. Basically takes you to a bunch of different settings you can tweak and change. I personally have no idea how to get to control panel in Windows 10 through a dialog. I know how to find it by searching though. And that's the thing with Windows 10, you can find most things by searching. So let's say you don't have File Explorer pinned to your start menu. Oh, let's just go ahead and unpin that guy. So you don't have File Explorer pinned to your start menu anymore, and you need to get to this PC. You can open your start menu and just type this PC, and it'll pull that right up. You just hit enter, and away you go. And of course, you can always repin that guy to your taskbar and then reposition it where you like. So the search functionality in Windows 10 is vastly improved. It's a little bit slow at times, especially when you have a lot of data. So if you're looking for an individual file, it may take a little bit for it to actually get you a result. But if you're looking for an application, it's relatively quick. Okay, a couple of quick setting changes. Since we are looking at the desktop right now, let's look at making some tweaks to our taskbar. This little guy right here, this is the Cortana button. It's a, if you've ever used Google Voice or Siri, it's very similar to that, but it's for Windows. I don't like it, so I get rid of it. Right-click your taskbar, and these are all the different controls you have for things that you can change just on your taskbar initially. So let's say this search bar here, it's basically the bar that you use. So when you open the start menu and type searching, it's that bar. It's just permanently visible, which is kind of annoying. So I like to turn that off. So that whole bar is gone. That gives you a whole bunch more room here for applications to pin or be running and not have them stack up at the end. You can still search for things. Just when you search, it actually pops that bar up. So it's not permanently in your workspace. Right, let's say, I think that got me a little bit lost. All right, so let's move on to managing multiple windows. Let's jump over there. So with Windows 10, you can, of course, well, I mean, with any version of Windows. Come on, Windows. I can't control my window. Interesting. Okay, it's not going to let me resize, or it's not giving me the indicator. There we go. Okay. So anytime you're working with multiple dialogues up in Windows, you can, of course, get stuff hidden behind another window like that. It can get a little bit annoying, especially when you have a large number of items open, or you're trying to bounce around quickly. Windows 10 introduced Snap. Actually, I think they introduced Snap in Windows 7, but Windows 10 really tweaked it a little bit more. So at any time, you can either take your web browser dialog and you can drag it. Oh, well, that's a snap. I didn't mean to do that, but now you know. So you can either drag your window up to the top of your dialog, and you'll see that it has that little ghost line that takes up the full screen. So that will basically maximize the window. It'll just full screen it for you. You can alternatively manually size your dialogues if it'll let you, which takes a few seconds, not that big of a time suck. But you can also drag your dialogues to the left or right sides of your screen. I'm not going to try the right side because I have another monitor over there and it might just go off screen. But you can drag it to the left side and it will automatically make that window take up half of your screen, and then it'll pop up over here so you can select from another dialog to make it take up the other half. So you can very quickly, set up multiple dialogues to be able to quickly, or multitask basically, and you don't have to use a web browser for this. You could, for instance, let's just move that guy. Let's make a new text document. And of course you can use Office or Word or whatever it is you like. This is just what's pre-installed with Windows. So again, we'll use the snap and then we'll have our text document. So you could be doing work in Excel here on the right, while you're, looking up whatever it is you're trying to cross-reference on the left. So it's a little bit easier way to multitask without having to use multiple screens. Maybe you don't have the desk space for multiple screens. So this is a simple, a quick little built-in trick to be able to multitask without needing to expand your physical work area. Flip is also another neat little window processing tool. I'm going to turn on the touch keyboard so you can actually see what I'm doing here. Also because I'm on a Mac and some of the keys are already taken up with Mac commands. So at any time you can press and hold Alt and then press the Tab key, and it'll give you this little pop-up dialog. So this is how Windows will allow you to switch between applications that are maybe hidden from view. You can continue to hold Alt and press Tab, and it will cycle through them like so. And then whatever one you let go on, it will pull up to the front. So if you have a lot of windows that you're working with and you don't know where it is, press and hold Alt, hit Tab, and cycle through them until you find the one that you want. Okay, task view. Task view is a new one for 10. That's going to be this button here, or the Windows key. The Windows key this time, not Alt. The Windows key and Tab. So this is task view. Close that little keyboard guy. This will show you all open applications that you have on this desktop, and some more device history over the last few days, all that good jazz. All that fun stuff. So it'll show you history over a few days, and it saves those links so you can click that and open it back up. Also, it introduces a new feature for Windows called desktops. Well, I mean, you've always had a desktop. That's your main landing page, but now you can have multiple desktops. Fun. Add more to keep track of. So to create a new desktop, bring up task view, hold the Windows key, press Tab, or press this little button down here, task view button, to bring up this dialog, and then click new desktop. So you'll see now up here along the top, I have desktop 1, which has my web browsers on it, my text document, all this good fun stuff. And then I have desktop 2. Desktop 2 doesn't have anything on it. It's still got access to my desktop, air quotes, I guess. So you can open up another series of items here on desktop 2. Okay, well, it ain't gonna let me just, whatever. You get the idea. It's a window. So at any time, you can switch between these. So you can have a desktop 2 set up with some applications and a desktop 1 set up with other applications. More multitasking here. All of this is about working more efficiently in your existing workspace. The multiple desktops thing has been around for a while on the Mac side, so it's really cool to see that carried over into the Windows side, because that's one of my favorite features, because I can have, a text editor open on one desktop that I'm working in full screen because I need, a long column of text, and then maybe a Windows virtual machine on another desktop taking up the full screen, because obviously I don't want to work in Windows in this tiny little window. And it just makes it really easy and fast to switch between them. Another cool thing you can do with the desktop view is maybe you open an application or you got somewhere on this desktop, but you no longer need that desktop. So you are going to shut it down, but you don't want to lose what you did with that application. So you can just click and drag your app over to any of your other desktops, and there they are. So you don't have to close down your applications. And actually, a better point is if you are going to close a desktop, it won't close your application. It's going to just shuffle any open applications that you have over there into another desktop. Since I only have 2, it's obviously going to shuffle everything over here. To close them, you just click the little X. So you'll have an X above any desktop at any time. Just hit that guy to shut it down. And you can, of course, stack this up with as many desktops as you want. I do caution you, though, it's very easy to get lost when you have that many desktops. Okay. All right, let's say you are working on your desktop like this and you have these applications open and you want to get back to an open screen. You don't want to see any of this. You want to find a file that is on your actual desktop. To do that, there is a button all the way on the bottom right-hand corner. It doesn't look like a button. It looks like a bar. It's right next to notifications. Ignore notifications. That's stupid. It's a little button here where you can see that little click and drag arrow. It's difficult for me because I'm running multiple screens, but if you click that, it will minimize everything, or at least make everything kind of vanish real quick to bring you back to your desktop. Alternatively, and a much easier method, hold the Windows key, press D for desktop. So at any time, you can have all those windows open, hold the Windows key, press D, and it will minimize all open dialogues. And if you want to go back, hold the Windows key again, and press D again. And they're back. So it's a very quick way to get back and forth from your desktop if you need to open and close files that you have stored there without having to go around and hit the minimize key on everything you have open. Because, you know, everybody likes that. Okay, I think we've covered most of the basics as far as managing multiple windows. Let's take a quick dive into some personalization. The main landing page for personalization is the personalize dialog. You can either right click anywhere on your desktop and go to personalize. Make sure you're on your desktop on your taskbar. Taskbar won't take you to personalize. Right click on your desktop, go to personalize. And this is where you can change, you know, the way that Windows looks or feels. So first thing first, it's going to land you on the background landing page. You can, of course, choose from a predetermined photo. Go ahead and shrink this guy down a bit so you can actually see that it's changing. You can browse for any number of pictures that you may have scattered around. You know, however, words are hard. However you please to pick the photo you like, you can change your background here. Colors is a little bit more fun. So you can actually change the theme and contrast of Windows itself. I personally prefer the dark mode. So you'll see that that changes the color of the taskbar and it changes the background color of the dialog box itself. Now this will be reflected across Windows. So you'll see the File Explorer now has a black background. I find this to be a much easier on my eyes, especially when I'm staring at a screen for 8 to 12 hours a day. So this is definitely one of the first things I do on any system I work on, or any system I personally work on a regular basis. I turn on dark mode if it's available. You can also pick your accent color. Since we are working with Land Effects here, I'm going to go ahead and go with green because I like it a green. And you'll see that it changes like like the fill in color here on this little toggle button went to green. The little highlight underneath an app icon to show that the app is actually open went to green. And then the text color went to green. So play around with that to find one that you want. Obviously, you don't want to pick a color that's going to make it very hard to read and work with. Say, for instance, we went with gray. Gray on a black background may not be the easiest text to read. Of course, I'm not saying green is much better, but hey, we're going to go with green. The lock screen. So that's the next guy. So anytime you walk away from your computer, if you have a screensaver set to come on, when you go to wake it back up, you're going to be greeted by your lock screen. It's basically just a landing page that requires you to log back in. If you have a password, you'll have to enter your password, and you can change the background that you have set there. Windows Spotlight just pre-selects from a list that Windows set up. You can set up a dedicated picture, or you can set up your own slideshow. You can also add applications to your lock screen, so you have stuff like your calendar, maybe your email is available on your lock screen, so you don't actually have to unlock your computer, or rather your notifications or status on those applications. I don't think it'll actually let you use the app without unlocking, especially if you have a password. One thing that I do like to do personally, if I'm going to be leaving my computer for a few minutes, I routinely lock the screen. Just because, you know, we do work in an office with some jokesters, and people do like to mess with people, and sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's a little bit of a nuisance to try to get back into the workflow. So if you're going to walk away from your Windows machine and you don't want that to happen to you, you can press and hold the Windows key again and hit L, and that'll send you straight to your lock screen. So if you have a password on your system, your password will be required to sign back in. I don't have a password on this computer, so I just hit sign in. Now themes, so themes are kind of an all-encompassing collection of the things we just talked about. So it's gonna be your background colors, lock screen, and even sounds. You can pre-save these into your own custom one. Now, I don't know if you can export or import those or at all, so I don't know how helpful that is. And you can also select from some predetermined Windows ones, and it looks like you can buy more on the Microsoft Store. So themes are something cool to play around with if you got a little bit of time to kill and you like to tweak the way that your UI looks. All right, the start menu here. So a few things with this guy. The show more tiles on start is essentially just going to allow you, or I'm not even sure why this toggle is here, but it's essentially so that you can add more of these tiles to the start menu. So you can set it up like a dashboard, I guess. So you just hit one button and it just shows you a list of all these pre-pinned stuff. It doesn't really make a difference if you turn that guy off. It just shrinks that guy down, but you can drag and drop this to your desired width. So I find that button to be pointless. The recently added apps, that's going to be this little section right here at the top. So right before the hashtag, this hashtag is going to be any apps that do not start with a, words are escaping my brain right now. A letter, yes, that. Any apps that don't start with a letter are going to show up under the hashtag, so they'll always be at the top. And then recently added will be anything you've recently installed. So for a little while, these will show up at the top. Eventually, they're going to disappear. So if you're used to opening them from here, don't be too surprised when they vanish, because that does happen. You can get rid of that by turning that toggle off, and then it just goes alphabetically regardless. So if you're not going to be pinning your applications to your taskbar or to your start menu, it might be best to turn off the recently added ones so that you don't get lost. You can turn on show most used apps. So that'll be any applications that you open frequently. For me, I've been opening File Explorer the most on this machine, so that's obviously at the top. Again, that list will change constantly as you use different applications. So depending on your organizational system, you may not like that. Suggestions are going to be like tips or things that it thinks you may want to use. I don't use that at all. So I usually turn that off. The start full screen. This is something that carried over from Windows 8, and I think it's absolutely atrocious. It basically turns your start menu into a full screen launchpad, which may seem cool, but can anybody tell me where to get to my list of installed applications? Because it doesn't seem super intuitive to me. It only shows me the stuff that's pinned. To get to the full list, you have to come up here and go to all apps, and then it breaks out your installed applications again into the same format. Some people may like it. Personally, I do not. So I turn that guy back off so that we get our nice little pop-out start menu. It's a little bit easier to navigate, and then all your installed applications are in the list. Right. Jared, do we have any questions thus far?
Yeah, we've had a couple good questions, but it can wait till when you got a good point, and we'll go through these questions.
Okay.
If now's that time, but whatever, you just let me know.
Okay. Let's wrap up the start menu stuff real quick, and then we can jump into those. All right, so we already covered the most used. So to customize your start menu, we'll go ahead and close this guy now. We don't need this anymore. To customize your start menu, these are obviously preset apps that Windows comes with. They're just kind of a generic list. You can right click and unpin an app from the list. You can click and drag it to another location. Like I showed earlier, you can click and drag this to expand it, so you can really build out this entire tile list if you prefer the tiles. It also uses live tiles. So you'll see here photos is actually cruising through and cycling through different pictures. That is a live tile, and it's just cruising through a little folder here. So these are just some stock photos that I threw in here to show what a live tile will do. You can, of course, turn that off. Right click, go to more, and then turn live tile off, and it just becomes a static background. Windows is going to set up live tiles depending on the application you put there. Some people like them, some people may not. Flip side is it is going to use a little bit more resources to run that live tile. So if you're on a system that's maybe not super up there, it might be beneficial to turn that off. We covered the pinning and unpinning. You can, of course, unpin an item. And let's say we want FXCAD on there. You can right-click FXCAD and pin to start, and that'll pop up here as well. And then you can still drag and drop and rearrange anything the way that you like. So this is entirely personal preference. You know, you get to play with it and put what you like where you like to make your day easier and easier to find what you need. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the tiles themselves, so oops, well, that's opening now. I like to unpin everything from the start menu. Lots of clicking. There we go. And then I can drag it back down so that it is just a start menu. Let's go ahead and we'll just minimize that guy for now. So now, anytime we open the start menu, it's literally just a list of our applications, which I find preferable. Some people may not. You can, of course, set that up whichever way you like. That wraps us up for the start menu for now. Jared, did you want to go over those real quick?
Yeah, we had a good question on upgrading from Windows 7 to Windows 10. Basically, do you have to reinstall applications like AutoCAD and stuff like that? And basically, yeah, it's I would offer that the upgrades of Windows have always been troublesome, but Windows always been troublesome, and people, IT people like us have always recommended doing clean installs. We would definitely recommend doing a clean install of Windows 10. But I would go one step further and say, even someone says they're upgrading from 7 to 10, to me that sets off warning bells that they probably don't have a solid state drive. It's probably at least a 2 to 3 year old computer. So really should be just upgrading the whole computer. But do you have anything further to say on upgrading from 7 to 10?
No, that pretty much sums it up. The in-place Windows upgrades do sometimes work okay, but by the time you generally find out that something is wrong and you're gonna have to wipe it out and start over anyways, you've wasted a few days chasing around oddball issues, like for instance, double-clicking a drawing file and it opens 2 CAD windows, or when you go to launch CAD after the upgrade, it just crashes. That is one thing that I can consistently or pretty much solidly say does not survive an in-place upgrade is CAD. In most of my experiences, AutoCAD has had to have been uninstalled and reinstalled fresh, no matter how smooth the upgrade went. So generally, anytime somebody's considering an upgrade, I recommend backing up their user data, which if you have a routine backup in place already, you should already have that content, but just back up your user data, wipe it out, do a fresh install, and just go through and reinstall your applications. It'll take a few hours, but everything will run much better, much smoother. You won't have nearly as many headaches.
Well, great. And then just had one more question. Jeffrey was mentioning that the Windows 10 desktop refresh seems to really bog his computer down as it kind of drives him crazy, and it seems to even lock up the computer sometimes. I don't have much experience with that. Do you have anything further to say on that?
That kind of circles back to the having large amounts of data on your desktop. I've kind of experienced that issue since dating back to the XP days, because coming from the tech world, I've have a lot of experience with computers, which I find hilarious because my parentals are not computer people whatsoever. And my dad has always been like that. He'll have his entire desktop plastered in files and folders. And like every couple of years, he'll move to a new system or he'll get a virus and we'll have to wipe it out or something. And he routinely has several gigabytes. Like I think the last time he had like 48 gigabytes worth of data on his desktop. And it seems to drag the computer down. I couldn't tell you why. I don't know the inner workings of how Windows handles its desktop refresh, but especially if you have a sort method set, it does go through periodically and kind of go, okay, this needs to be pushed over here or whatever. So maybe it has something to do with that. But yeah, I don't recommend keeping large amounts of data on the desktop if you don't have anything on the desktop and it still seems to slow it down. Check to see if you're using an animated wallpaper or a live wallpaper. Those definitely consume a bit of resources. They do look pretty. They are very cool, but yeah, they definitely consume a bit of resources and can kind of drag things down if you're kind of running on the edge.
Oh, great. And always just a reminder that, like you were showing, it's a lot easier to just put a shortcut on your desktop to, a folder where your files are rather than having the files themselves actually live on the desktop, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Very easy to create a shortcut. And then you can keep everything stored, like for your documents, for instance, in your documents folder. You just have a nice, neat little landing page to get to where you want to go quicker.
And then one last comment. Jeff chimed in and says he has he downloaded one of those. I think it's a skin, but he gets his to actually look like Windows XP of all things,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was adorable. um, but yeah, so there are those cool skins to get those looks. Certainly the ones where you're more familiar with. But you are. I would just have the comment that yeah, there is a point there where might be holding on a little far back because eventually, at some point, you're gonna have to embrace the newer interface, whether it's Windows 11 or 12 or 13, right? I think they're getting somewhere with this Windows mobile sort of look that they're slowly inching towards, and you're gonna want to be able to operate it without having that look of Windows XP on it. But there are some really good ones. So I mean, not to say don't ever install those skins, but I don't know, what do you have any comment on those?
I've been running into those over the years. One of my old coworkers was on a Windows 7 box, and she had a Windows 2000 skin on it. I guess you really liked that style. I mean, that's one of the cool things about using a theme is you can kind of skin the system to look the way that you like. A lot of third-party companies do make them as well. It's kind of tricky, but definitely want to make sure if you're going to be using one of those that it's from a tried, tested, and validated company. It's not just I found this download link on Google and it says, yeah, this will change my computer to look like a Linux box or something, and like it's from some random download site. You got to be careful with those because you could just be downloading a virus. So definitely, if you're going to be using that stuff, make sure you stick to validated sites.
I just remember Windows 2000 had the little animated dinosaur mouse icons, and it was
Yep.
only on Windows 2000. And we would keep copying over those little mouse icon files from each version that we'd upgrade because my dad really liked them. Because the little dinosaur would walk backwards, while you're waiting for the instead of an hourglass, it was the walking dinosaur. It was really fun.
That would definitely be something that I would be carrying over as long as possible.
They were very adorable.
Okay. All right. Well, if that wraps up our questions for now, I do have a couple more things to cover. One thing you may want to do at some point is change your default applications, and that'll be so. We're going to go back into our documents here. That'll be for like our default application to open .dwg files right now is the AutoCAD drawing viewer or launcher. That's the preferred application for opening drawing files, by the way, because it automatically launches the last version of CAD that was used. So if you have, say, Civil 3D 2020 and Architecture 2018 as an example on your system, but you predominantly work in Civil 3D, you're going to want the drawing launcher because it's going to open whatever version of CAD you used last. So say you have to do a file in architecture, but then you go back to working out of civil, you don't want that drawing to open in architecture if you want to use civil. It's just a bunch of extra steps. So let's take a look at default apps. Now to get there, we keep talking about the right click here. The start button also has a right click. So this is one of the most used menus I used in Windows 10. If you want to get to your list of installed applications, apps and features. Mobility Center is going to be mostly for like power savings or basically quick features to help you move your computer from place to place without disconnecting things. Power options will be energy saving, display, sleep, hard disk sleep, hibernate, that sort of stuff. Event viewer is something a sysadmin will predominantly use. Most of your end users won't even touch this. If you ever want to know what components your system has, that's system. Right click your start button, go to system. Nope, not device manager. If I could click things, it would be better. So if you got a system, this will tell you, of course, virus and threat protection isn't set up because I haven't set it up, but this will tell you, what your processor spec is, how much RAM you have. It'll tell you your version of Windows. It'll also tell you your computer name. That's important. So my device name is that little string of things. It'll tell you your version of Windows, the build that you're on. So this is 1909. This is the latest version of Windows, or Windows 10, rather. If you do need to get a little bit more info, like your video card, for instance, that'll be Device Manager. So same thing, right-click the Start button, go to Device Manager, and here you can actually see the individual components of your system. It's really easy to get lost in here. Primarily, an end user is going to be looking at display adapters if they're here. I'm showing a parallels because this is a virtual machine. Normally, you'll actually see a physical hardware component. So that's the easiest way to figure out where that is. All right. Now we have Edge installed and we have Google Chrome. Say right now Edge is my default browser. A very easy way to change that is just change default. Oh, well, if I could spell. There you go. Change default web browser. So again, the Windows 10 search feature is very helpful. I highly recommend using it. Just like you would search for something on Google, you can search for something in Windows. So you can get to default apps by going to settings. Oh, it's not going to open because I have that open, but you can get there by going to settings and then going to apps and then default apps, and we're there. Or you can change default web browser and we're there. So 2 different ways to get to the same place. There's of course several other ways to get there, but pick your poison, whichever you prefer. To change your web browser, it's very simple. Just click and pick a different one. I prefer Chrome, so I'm going to change it to Chrome. All right, we covered that guy. Now, since we were talking about DWG, you can of course change your applications for default file types. I don't know what's happening. Actually, I think this is going to take me back to the same place. Here we go. Choose default types, files by type. Most of the time, you're not going to even bother with this, but if you ever do end up, say, setting your DWGs to open with Adobe Reader, I've run into that a few times. It does happen. Sometimes a computer doesn't have a default file type set. So when you go to open it, it'll ask you this: how do you want to open this file? And sometimes it'll give you this list of stuff that doesn't work. So let's say I want to open this with Notepad, for instance. I'm gonna get that ain't gonna work. I can't do anything with that. So if you ever accidentally set a file type, you can always come in to default apps by file type, look for your file that you're looking for. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here that you really don't need. It's a big list, so it may take you a little bit to get through it to find what you're looking for, but oh, we went past it. Here's our drawing. So DWG is currently set to the drawing launcher. You can, of course, change it here. So whatever you change it to here, that's what Windows is going to use when you double click the file. A couple of tracking things, because we all love being tracked. Windows 10 out of the box, especially if you buy, like if you buy a computer from a retail store like Best Buy or Amazon, something like that, they're always going to come preloaded with bloatware, and Windows is going to be pre-configured out of the box. So it's going to have a bunch of this stuff already turned on. So let's go into settings and privacy. And then you've got a couple of quick privacy things here. You can, of course, I don't want that. I don't want that. And I don't want that. So I can just turn all that off. One of the big things though, where is it? And again, I navigate Windows by searching for things 90% of the time. We want general. Oh, we're in general. Well, Interesting. This is a different dialogue than I had earlier. Well, whatever. Let's see if we can get there by. Okay. You know what? Forget it. Move on. Tailored experiences. So tailored experiences is going to be using your data to actually like direct ads and everything. at you. So that's for diagnostics and feedback here. By default, I believe this is going to be on full. I have it set to basic, turned off, and then I've gone through on the initial Windows setup and turned most of this stuff off. But if you go into this, so open up settings, go to privacy, and then you're looking at diagnostics and feedback. If you pop in here, you'll find that a lot of these are turned on. And this is just tracking different things that you do on the computer, you know, your name, your email, things like that. And it sends it out to Microsoft and other partners. They share that data with other partners as well. So I turn 90% of this stuff off because well, for one, I hate ads. So just because something is showing me an ad that's geared towards something I like doesn't mean I want to see the ad. So I turn almost all this stuff off. Location is another one. This is going to be on by default. It allows different applications to use your location, which most of the time they're wrong anyways. Like I can't tell you how many times I open up like to order groceries from Smart and Final or something, and it tries to deliver me groceries to Los Angeles. It's like, yeah, that'll be great. I'll do a 3-hour drive to pick up some oatmeal. This will be fun. So I turned that off. Default location. You can set a default location in case the tracking above can't find you. So you can tell it that. You can also clear it, and then you can set which apps get access to that information. So that'll be a good one. That about covers everything. This about wraps up the basics for Windows 10. Of course, there's a lot more to dive into. It's just for the scope of this, I think that covers most of my talking topics. Did we have any more questions come up?
No, I think we covered it. So I didn't even know I could turn some of that stuff off there. So I'm following along and turn that off on mine. So thank you for that. Well, cool. So yeah, I think we'll wrap this up. Reminder: this was recorded. It'll be up on the website. And also, if there's any further ideas you have for webinars, please always let us know. That's what we need to know, what you want to learn or find out about. That really helps us out. And other than that, just
Oops.
hey everybody, have a great weekend.
Bye.